Okay, Junyi, let's take a look at your introduction. Lingua franca is defined. You might find that a concept like lingua franca could have a number of different definitions. It's difficult to say which one is right. Therefore, it's better to hedge and say lingua franca can be defined, and then you're giving one possible definition in case some definitions disagree. In modern life, it's not really accurate enough, is it? In modern life has been going on for quite a long time, maybe since the 60s or 50s. You could give some information as to how long English has been adopted or what kind of time frame. That might be more accurate and more academic. English is adopted, present simple. I think you might need some kind of present perfect or past construction here, because I think this process started a long time ago, and you might need to say exactly when. This is an interesting situation. As you picked up yourself, this is too personal. Also, you've got short sentences here. It would be better to make a more complex sentence. It's not true that only English is accepted as a lingua franca. If you look at a world map and look at the second languages in those countries, you'll find that a lot of countries have a second language which is not English. So, although English is the widest spread global language, it's not the only language or second language that countries choose. The reasons for this phenomenon are valid. We don't really need to know if they're valid or not. We do need to know what the reasons are, perhaps, rather than saying they're valid. Okay, so this essay will use the example of the original lingua franca to explain how English became the lingua franca. That is something you don't really need to do very much. You might talk about it only in the introduction, because you have to consider the economic, legal, political forces, and the real question is to what extent can these forces also explain the rise of English as a lingua franca. So it seems that you have shown that, yes, economic, legal, and political forces led to the development and spread of English. But you seem to have not picked up that there could be another side of the question in this introduction. Okay, in terms of okay, so let's look at overall. Overall, I think you could do with a few more references, and I think you need to pick up on the possibilities that part of the rise of English as a lingua franca is not only economic, legal, and political. It could also be other things like culture, soft power, those types of things. You'll have to read about it and present broadly the two sides of the argument. So I think if you answered the way you're planning to answer it, you might be missing what the question is really asking for. Generally, I agree with Justin. The structure is quite good. The content is a little bit weak. Oh, dear. I see you've got a second one here. I should have gone for that one first. Okay. Same things are true for the reasons for this phenomenon are valid. Okay, telling us that the forces can be divided into three parts as well, you're just repeating the question. The question is actually asking what other forces could explain the rise of English, if there are any other forces that can explain. So think of the question as, are there any other forces that could explain it? And if so, what are they? And to what extent is it economic, legal, and political? And to what extent is it the other ones? I think if you think about the question like that, you'll be closer to getting a good answer. Okay, let's move on to you, Han. Let's do this in blocks of 5 students, maybe. Because I don't seem to have a pause button on this app, unfortunately. Okay, the Scottish independence referendum was finished on the 18th of September 2014. You would need a reference for this, and you'd also need a space here. 4.3 million people participated in the vote. Again, you need a reference for that, because you weren't at the polling station. You don't actually know that for sure. You're not an expert. So you need a reference for that. Some people, not academic enough, word form should be independence. Doesn't work in this sentence. You need a different word form of independence. This sentence structure doesn't work. You've got that, making it into a relative clause, but the structure, well, you need to add something in to make that structure work. Again, sentence structure here is getting difficult. While other people insist that Scotland should stay in Britain. Okay, your structure's not bad here because you're giving your reasons. The language needs some work though, because establishing a new government would cost too much. Okay. In any case, this vote could not only affect the future pattern. Pattern is not accurate here. What do you mean by pattern? A pattern is normally something we have on our clothes or something like that. So out of context, it doesn't really make sense. It's the wrong synonym. Yes, it would have some influence on the European Union. Scotland would not be in it. Okay, I would say the same thing to you as I said to Sean earlier. You've looked at the question from the point of view of the voters, but the question is not asking from the point of view of the voters. It's from the point of view of logic, okay? So you might look at economic arguments, political arguments, cultural arguments, but don't just lay out the two sides of the question as people who voted yes and people who voted no. The question is not asking whether people should vote yes or no. It's asking whether Scotland should be independent or not. So overall, the structure is okay. You need far more references for these facts. You shouldn't talk about the people. A lot of language to work on. Both sides of Scottish independence are discussed in later sections from history to analyse the reason why Scotland should not be independent. Okay, so you're giving your position. I think it might be better to give your position a little earlier. So, or perhaps just say it in a slightly more direct way than that. Although there's nothing wrong with that. That is a thesis statement. It works. Yeah. So overall, some language to work on. The structure of the answer is okay, but don't focus on the people. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I think you do need to combine some of your simple sentences together, and yes, attention to word accuracy. And yes, you're right, you do need to put some references in it. I'm glad you picked that up. Good, well done. Okay, and Sean agrees that you need more references, good. Very good point about that being too general. Good suggestion. And I absolutely agree there should be more details to explain impacts on the UK, EU, or the world brought by independence. Yeah, good. I'm really glad, Sean, that you can take what I showed you and show it to other people. That shows that this is really sinking in. Well done. And yeah, you're also right about grammar mistakes. Okay, let's have a look at Rukhlan's introduction. A number of controversies on the Scotland position. I think the issue of Scotland is a controversy. I don't think we can count them. I think it's always been controversial. So it might be more accurate to say the issue of whether Scotland should be part of the UK or not has always been controversial among politicians, writers, and what do you mean by nationals? Scottish nationals or British people? So think about that. Okay, Robert Burns described this annexation with words: Scots had bought and sold for English gold. So you're using this to show one side of the argument. I think you might need to be a bit clearer. Don't let the quote speak for you. You need to say what the quote means in academic writing. Well, many are satisfied within the UK membership. Many is not particularly academic here. At this stage, what do you mean by this stage? After the election? And dissented is the wrong word here. Dissenting normally means disagreeing or rebelling, but in a slightly different context. This is confirmed. This is present tense, but this is something that happened in the past. Recent spelling mistake. Did the opponents win? Okay, you can say it that way, it's all right. Despite the fact that the referendum left behind, there's a grammar mistake here, but who left it behind? This would need rewriting. The issue in question remains open, sharp, and subject to wide speculation. Does it remain open? Sharp is the wrong word, and subject to wide speculation. I think the issue is, because we believe in democracy generally, I think the issue is closed for a while. So I don't think it's accurate to say that the issue remains open, sharp, and subject to wide speculation. If things don't change satisfactorily in the future, it might be open again to wide speculation, but I just don't think that's accurate. But I think the question is still a good question. So you might need some other way of justifying why it's important to answer this question. I wouldn't talk about the Scots way again. You're talking about the people there, but the question is just, should Scotland be independent? Be objective. Don't talk about the people. Don't talk about your opinion. Talk about an objective stance. You might look at it from Scotland's point of view and from the UK's point of view. After all, it takes two to tango and two countries to ally themselves and two countries to divorce themselves as well. There are many steps on the Scots way to become and the Scots cannot become a state. The Scots are people. So that is a logical error. Building the economy, well, the economy is fairly built. Of course, they could do better. Maintenance of military forces, well, these are held in common, so Scotland may not actually have its own military forces. That's a legal question. Creation of a new national currency was a big debate, whether they needed to or not. So this is more something in debate rather than something that's true. and the question of membership in of international organisations, preposition problem there. Wrong word form there. Scotland is a country, but we're talking about the independence of Scotland, so you need a different word form. Okay, that's a good outline and good thesis. So overall, I think there's quite a bit of inaccuracy, and I think you need to be a bit clearer about the situation. Don't get confused between the question and what the people think, as I said to the other people. Try to be more objective and analyze the situation from more objective perspectives. But your structure, the order in which you talk about things, is fine. And there are some really good sentences, particularly the last one. Okay, good point there by Sean. A number of is okay. Definition of Great Britain. We don't really need a definition of Great Britain, as we know what it is. We need definitions of things that we don't know. Like we need more detail in some of these parts. We don't know what Robert Burns was trying to say exactly, and it might be better for you to explain that a little bit more. And this is a little bit unnecessary to use Robert Burns there. You could just use a more objective standard. Talk about the arguments put forward for the S camp, the arguments put forward by the no camp, focusing on the arguments rather than the people who make them. That would be much more objective. And I think that advice goes for everybody else as well. Because Rukhlan's introduction is a little bit more advanced than the others, we're able to give slightly more advanced advice. Okay, but good work. Okay, let's leave it there for a second.